Well, first of all, I do want to applaud the Gang of Four, as we've been lovingly calling these bipartisan senators getting together under Majority Leader Schumer's leadership. And it was really important to be able to have this kind of conversation. I want to say that up front. And I think there is a lot of sentiment and agreement. The Senate Majority Leader is completely right. Everyone raised their hand when he asked about regulation. I think the question is, and this was very interesting in the room, and I have to say it was, one of the issues where we saw a real power differential in the room between those of us focused on people and companies focused on competition, which is, what does it mean to say regulation, and what are we regulating for? So, for example, Elon Musk, certainly was the one who went out there and said, look, basically, don't worry about self-driving cars. That's not the issue, the safety issue. Worry about the end of civilization. Well, okay, none of us want to live in Terminator world. This is the person who has 42,000 satellites up in space. I mean, but the question became, all right, but and we had one academic in the room, Professor Deborah Raji, who said, yeah, and actually called that out and said, well, actually, there really are very serious concerns about what AI does when it comes to hurting people, and that does include self-driving cars, and we need to make sure we're regulating so there's safety there. I think that's a really important kind of conversation, but we need more of that kind of conversation with the public.
It's with the public. It's really interesting you say that, and it's really interesting you talk about this power differential in the room between the sort of billionaire business leaders and folks like you guys who are raising your hands on this stuff. Also, by the way, bipartisan Senator criticism of this, right? Senator Blumenthal talking about we've already got a framework legislation out there to regulate AI. He said this forum is not created to produce legislation. Josh Hawley calling it a giant cocktail party. Are they right? And should this have been in front of the American people?
Well, first of all, I think this conversation is and is going to continue to be in front of the American people, and it is thanks to senators like Senator Blumenthal and Senator Hawley. I don't think we ever thought we would put those two names together, and that's an incredibly important thing to recognize, that there really is a bipartisan opportunity here, and particularly when we're starting from a place where, whether you're the civil rights community or the tech sector, there's agreement that there has to be regulation. I mean, the question is what? And I think there's going to be legislation. There's going to be a way to enable this. We have, at the Leadership Conference, created the Center on Civil Rights and Technology in order to have more of these conversations and enable and create more public dialogue and public education. That's a must.
Can I ask you this? There was a big problem with facial recognition technology a few years ago because it was mainly created by white men. Having diverse voices in the room and creating this technology and regulating it, can you speak to why that is so important for the future?
Yeah, look, this is so critical, and this is part of what we were saying in the room, but where there's a real power differential in terms of understanding what this really means for real people. Not as much on facial recognition. I think there's so much research out there. Tech firms would agree with that. But that when we're talking about artificial intelligence, we're talking about these models built on data, and data that is scraped from an unequal, discriminatory society, whether you're women, whether you're people with disabilities, but people of color. Facial recognition is one of the really obvious high risks, but also where you get the data from. We're seeing that, for example, people of color, when we get facial recognition, it's coming through law enforcement. Oftentimes when we have people stopped and then biometrics taken, if they're arrested, even if they're never ever charged with a crime. But that means you show up in the data in a particular kind of way. And one of the elephants in the room in the discussion yesterday was that the European Union has been taking the lead on protecting consumers, protecting privacy, mandating transparency, trying to protect startups that will provide more competition for big tech companies, but saying it all has to be done preventing risk, particularly to marginalized communities like facial recognition. And many of the the people in that room who are saying we agree with regulation were also kind of saying, but don't do EU, the European Union, when we have the opportunity as the West globally to come together and say, we're going to set the standard for the world that says we're going to put people first and ensure that technology serves people, not profit.
And with GDPR, just one example of where Europe led on this with social media, the companies have also shown takes a lot of work, it's expensive, but they can comply with it if governments mandate it. Maya Wiley, President and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. Thank you very much. Illuminating to hear about what it was like in the room.